Lucky Boys Podcast.
Okay, welcome back, Don.
Good to be back.
All right. You guys really believe that there is no difference between choosing a sperm donor, if you guys have to pick a sperm donor, right? One that has Ivy League credentials, CEO, their grandparents were extremely successful business people, highly educated. You just go back to the family tree, you can just see that there's a lot of evidence of high intelligence. And the other way, not that there's anything wrong with it, but you just look at it, they were more physical workers. Like my family tree comes from farmers, right? You look at farmers, and let's just say their biggest accomplishment is being a manager at a fast food chain, right? And all things equal, let's say healthy child, right? Genetically equal, the cost is the same. You wouldn't care. You wouldn't pick the Ivy League CEO sperm donor versus the other manager at a fast food chain?
I wouldn't. I just think it's important just to have a healthy baby. And I think, like they say in life, it's better lucky than good. Right. So I was with a lot of free times these days. You know, you read a lot of the have some time, look at YouTubes and search the web. And one interesting thing that I found that they said about Chinese thinking culture is that in your lifetime, there are 3 opportunities where you can make it financially successful. First time is that when you were born, that you're born into a rich family. Second time is when you, from your education, when you start to do work, what job did you find? And if that still didn't happen, all right, you name it, it's your kids. Are they going to be successful? So those are the 3 moments in one's life where your financial status is established.
So let's run that back. So it's either you're born into it, super lucky, right? So that takes 0 talent. Second is if you're able to make something of yourself, you find opportunities and create something out of nothing. Third, or if your children can do that.
That's right.
Which I feel like a lot of immigrant parents rely on.
Mm-hmm. Well,
right?
I think that's it. I mean, clearly they didn't born into wealth, or if they born into wealth, they lost all the wealth. And then they decide to come to the country like, to be an immigrant. Really, they're relying on the future of the kids having a better life. And then, in a way, that is their accomplishment.
Does that make their kid an investment?
I don't know if it's an investment is the way to put it. I think for a lot of Chinese parents, they see it as more of their responsibility, not even an obligation, but that is their responsibility.
There's a lot of people that I speak with, they feel like they're investments to their parents. They're expected to give their parents a certain amount of money every month. They're expected to, and if you're older, you're expected to give your siblings a certain amount of money if they're still in school and they're not fending for themselves. There was this wild TikTok video. I'm not on TikTok, but I read an article about it that went absolutely viral. This Vietnamese girl, she was crying and pouring her heart out online, saying that her parents have disowned her because she's out there in the real world working, trying to make a life for herself, and her parents has expectations of her to take care of her younger sibling to support her lifestyle, lavish lifestyle, I believe, in college, and to basically put her way through school while she continues to work away. And that's her responsibility as the oldest sibling. And that's not just a one-off situation. I do know other Asian families where the oldest siblings, and I'm not the oldest sibling, so I'm not speaking of myself, but I do know at times my oldest sister perhaps felt like she had to be the second mother and take care of the whole family and shoulder the responsibility. And I've never asked her this, but she may or may not have felt like an investment. But I do know that other friends of mine who were the oldest sibling did feel like their parents treated them as an investment more than a child.
There could be people like that, but I have to say, this is my 25th years of, running to a nonprofit senior centers. And from the 25 years I have exposed to talking to seniors, people who retire, I don't see that. At least for the one that shows up. I mean, it's a unique demographic, right? The one that actually come to a center and be with their friends. I would say, from my experience talking to them, that they feel like it is just their responsibility that I gave my kids the opportunity. Now, don't get me wrong. I've heard some, know of some horrific cases where the kids abandon their parents and, and in fact causes a lot of, uncomfortable conversation within that population. But by and large, I think that the seniors that I've been dealing with for the last 25 years, they pretty much are all saying, yeah, I'm here to give my kids a better life, no matter, whatever happened afterward.
Have you heard of scenarios where the children no longer cares for the parents, where they don't even visit them?
Oh, plenty of, absolutely. I think some intentional.
But what are their thoughts? I'm curious as to know. I've heard the children's side of things. Oh, my mom and dad's so toxic. I just can't deal with their negativity. They don't understand me, and they disown their parents. Or I have my own family now, and they kind of unintentionally forget about their parents because they're just so wrapped up in their own lives, the American way being here, right? What is the story on the other end of that?
They just felt like, they have failed. That they, some of them, they blame
themselves?
The parents failed.
They think some of the seniors blame themselves.
At that age? Oh
yeah,
God,
they blame themselves. Right? I mean, some of this situation, they also understand how society, they have a better handle of dealing with adversity than most people do. So, for example, when the separation happened from the kids, is that they found a job in the Midwest. They found a job upstate. They found a job outside of New York City. But the parents, they want to be in New York City. They want to be with their friends. They don't want to move out there to be, in their word, in jail,
right.
坐監, So in that way, they just feel like, hey, that's, at least they feel in comfort that I gave them that chance. And so they're not going to spend more time with me, but at least I don't have to worry about them. They're okay. Now, there are other situations where, this is another true situation, right? It's where the son lost a job, and someone would go to them, don't worry, why don't you start a business? But I have no money. Oh, take a mortgage from your house. Have your moms get a mortgage. So now
from the parents' house.
From the parents' house, because they don't own a home. So now they took a mortgage. Not every business. How many was the success rate of business startups, right? So we have seen those cases where now they have to go back and tell mom, sorry, mom, we have to move out because, right? So now we actually have attorneys to explain to the parents how you can protect yourself by making sure that your right to stay in that building is protected, so, but they're open to that. I've seen situations like that, but, they just go, oh, you got soy jai, blah, 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 and then they just move on.
That's it. They just get a bad boy.
Slap on the wrist, like, okay.
Right?
You bad boy.
And so all is forgiven, basically.
If I did that, do you know what my parents would do to me? What would your parents do to you if you did that? You just short sailed their home or foreclosed it.
As much as my mom nags me, I know she loves me. So even if I did something like that, I think she would be like, soy jai, and everything would be kind of forgiven. Yeah. Honestly.
Oh no, I would get killed. I would get killed, man.
I disown you.
I could be 80 years old if I did that to them. I'll be killed.
But you have to think about the life experience of these seniors, right? They saw, like the grandma who was set on fire. She saw bombs dropped on her. They escaped poverty like you don't believe, right? Took her 3 weeks to get back into Toisan from Hong Kong, when in today is like a 2-hour trip.
Yeah.
Right. So then you come to America. You have another one of the other ladies. She's a doctor. The Cultural Revolution. She lost her job. She just cannot practice anymore. Half her doctor friends were killed during the Cultural Revolution. Then you come here instead where she just used your suture and save patients. She end up here working with her mom in a factory cutting threads in a restaurant. So in a garment factory, right? So if that's their life experience, they can endure
a lot.
They can endure.
You know what? Maybe Toysans are more relaxed about that culturally because I'm FJ. I'm Fukjao, Fujianese. I'll tell you right now, I don't know any Fujianese parents that'll play that. You come back home, you tell them you zeroed out their mortgage, or they're fully paid home and now it's been repossessed.
I'm
FJ
sorry,
parents,
you live on the street.
Don't know any FJ parents that'll take that. They will whoop your butt. Like you're done.
Well, that's what I mean. I think the life experience, what they endure, what they saw, right? Like here's another example. Not a true story, right? Some kids disown, and I wonder what would I do if I were this kid, right? So she owns a building, this lady, but she goes out. She's a canner. She goes out and collect cans.
She owns a building and she collects cans?
Collects cans. She goes out and collect cans. Now, just because they own a building, you got to remember, they work in a factory, so there's no pension, right? So she's basically don't feel like it's right to raise the rent for her tenants. So they're all living there. So she's really providing public housing for the city of New York, right?
Yeah.
So she feels like, hey, I gotta save up for the better days. She knows her bills are going up. Property tax and everything else, right? The buildings pay off, but property tax, water, everything's going up. So she feel like I got to work again. So if I'm sitting home, why don't I just go? She goes and collect cans, right? And then when she died, they find out there's so much money that she has so much cash stashed away. But the daughter disowned her. She moved out.
Why did the daughter disown her?
I didn't have a chance to talk to them, but she basically says, again, we don't want to bring up uncomfortable conversation, right? She comes to the center,
right.
She eats, she's happy, she go collect cans, we'll make sure she's safe. That's what she wants to do. But I think there's a lot of, that's why when all of these attacks that happen in our community and people talk about, the mental states of people perpetrating, what about the mental state of people in our own community, right? This daughter of her who feels uncomfortable with her mom collecting cans to the point that she moved away and, willing to walk away from everything. And now the mother continues to collect cans because she feels like she want to make sure that, do something for her daughter, So how is that ever going to get resolved? How is that ever going to get addressed? And I don't think that's unique to her. It happens.
Wow. Cutting off your family off just because I guess you disagree. I mean, like, for my own personal experience, my mom collects cans. I always criticize her. I tell her, like, there's no need for that. She doesn't need to do it. But I would never cut her off because she continues to do that.
But this lady, I'm talking about carrying.
Like a
full load.
Full load.
Right?
Wait, what? To what extent? Because there's levels to can collecting.
Oh, okay.
You got one.
Oh, no, one bag.
You got one that was just
one
like
plastic
a
bag.
simple plastic bag where they're just trying to recycle a little bit.
But honestly,
but then you got one that's like it looks like they could buy a PlayStation. Like they straight up got a broomstick across their back, two humongous hefty bags, and then they got a shopping cart full of cans, and they're rolling up in the street like that.
Right.
Like, is it?
It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
No,
Okay.
it's
But again, no matter what level, I don't see
to
where
the
it's
extent,
appropriate.
to the extent where you
just
cut the
say,
person's off. A
"Screw you,
relationship.
mom. I'm embarrassed." Like, even as an adult, like you just
I don't
kind
see
of
it
go,
either. Yeah.
like you got to understand where your parents came from, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would assume that she came from nothing. That's why she has some type of hoarding mentality, or where she never feels good enough, or she doesn't feel like she has enough.
It's a lack of something.
And in their world, they're like, "You're willing to give me 5 cents for every can I got?
Right.
That's
and it's
a great
free.
deal."
And in their mind, in their mind, it's free.
I get to walk around.
Right.
I get to,
and I'm helping out.
I'm helping out.
I'm helping out. So,
Right.
if you go to China, Hong Kong, right? It's not unusual to see old ladies collecting boxes, and it's a job. I mean, I don't want people to think that, hey, all of these people collecting cans have a home. There's also a lady that I know who collect cans because one of these ladies was kicked out from the Bowery, right? 80, 89, 85 Bowery, I think that's the building. But and I'm like, why are you still working? You know, how come you don't have any food stamp or anything like that? And she says, well, I'm still sponsoring my kids over. I'm like, you are 70 years old, your husband is 80.
What?
And yep, they're not on any, subsidies, right? Entitlement, nothing. Because they know that if they want to sponsor to give a better life to her kids in China, to sponsor them over to this country, that she doesn't want to be on collecting, welfare. And she works. So her work is, so I would help her get some jobs, hand out flyers, right? But rest of the time she collects cans. She collects cans so that at least they can get a meal. And this is really, so there's people who are actually doing that. Again, the whole theme of, I'm still going to give my kids the best shot in life.
That's rough, man. That's rough, because you would hope that at the age of 70 or 80, I mean, just going into the typical age of what we would classify as retirement, that you would at least be in some sort of comfort, or you get to travel the world. You told me that you were just in Scotland and traveling for a full month, and it just seemed like, yeah, I just decided to come back to New York. I mean, that is the dream for me when I get older, right? It's just buying a one-way ticket and going anywhere I want, not to continue to do something that I don't want, or worse than that, just barely surviving. That just sounds horrible. And the children, to know that their parents are still struggling at that age, I mean, that must feel like, I mean, that's pretty shitty.
That breaks my heart. I mean, like, that's...
Every time I see one of them carrying one of those little bags in the street, my heart just like,
yeah, one of my dreams was like, when I was growing up, living in a tenement apartment, I always wanted to get out there and work and provide for my family and get them out of the neighborhood and buy a house for them. So they kind of living the American dream, which was kind of instilled in me grow up here. And that was something that I strive to provide for my family.
All right. No, even my trip out in Scotland really was to be supportive to my daughter, right? So she's got a couple of performances in school, and I, was stretched out. So I just make sure that I got to be there to show some support. And again, I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do that. But then again, it hits home, when I hear about this fire recently on Mulberry Street, right? Mm-hmm. Where 2 people died.
Right. It was a 91, 92-year-old lady with dementia,
right,
and her son, who was, I guess, in his 50s. Right, and he also was dealing with some sort of issue, right?
But the caregiver, the home care attendant, was 67.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
still
gosh.
Working.
She is working to take care of, think about that environment, right? So when people said, oh, these guys were, things were so clutter, right? These guys are hoarding, and the fire department was throwing things out the window so they can get to them. Think about it, right? With all that said, did anyone think about this lady's 67 years old, and she's spending 24 hours a day taking care of these 2, a 91-year-old, right? And is someone talking to her like, okay, what happens after that? So it's tough. It's tough to so I know of people like that, and there are seniors who come to our center who are still working, right? So
and does that 67-year-old? I mean, she probably has kids. I mean,
that must. She's supporting her kids.
Yeah, that
life,
particular one, I don't know. I mean, I don't know her directly, but I know there are seniors who are at our center who are working. Some of the ladies that you see pushing the dim sum carts.
Don, I want to go back. When you say they have regrets, you spoke with a few of them in your senior center, and they have expressed regret on how they raised their children. What type of regrets? Did they ever go into detail about that? Like, did they regret how they raise them, or do they regret
Not giving them enough.
or do they regret giving them too much?
Most of them would regret not finding a better environment for them to be in. So you have to remember the seniors that we care for are from the South Brooklyn area, right? They live along the Brighton lines, Shipshead Bay. So they feel like, we move out from Chinatown, but so much is removed from them also that my kid doesn't really, now they're living in a different part of New York City that doesn't give a sense of their own cultural identity. Maybe if they were get a more Chinese culture in them, that they will treat me a little bit differently, but they're more American, so to speak. So did my move to put them in a different environment, did that, I gained one part so there's this certain level of conflict that they got a better life, they on their own, but then now they're
gone.
Now they're gone.
Yeah.
Now they're separated. That relationship.
That's one of my concerns about being a father, that I'm so close with my kids, and I'm real big on family, and I'm real big on family, whether it's blood or not. If Norm, some of my friends I consider my brothers, and I'm real big on that. And it would pain me to know that my kids no longer are interested in hanging out with me or seeing me, like they don't miss me. And I know that's just part of life or the American culture, where you have to schedule each other in, right? Whereas over in other countries, it's just normal to have everyone under one roof, a full house, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Or still having the respect for your elders, for your mom and dad, your grandparents, taking care of everyone. It has more of a village type feel, like a small company, right? It's very intimate. And for somehow when we're here, the culture is very big, right? There's so much going on in this bubble that we're in, that we tend to forget about the people that got us here, right? Yeah. And then we come up with reasons, some of them very valid, but some of them it's a bit of a stretch, where we say, oh, my mom and dad didn't do this. Like I spoke with someone and they got really mad that their parents wasn't able to pay for their college fully, so then they had to settle for NYU.
What?
Okay. Or I kid you not.
Yeah.
I kid you not.
That's weird, because when I was growing up, I never expected my parents to actually front me money to go to college.
Same here.
It was like, if I wanted to go to college, I just, and they never said this to me. I it's my responsibility. If I wanted to go, it's my responsibility. I never thought and they never said anything to me or even forced me to,
To go to college?
No, not to go to college, but to say like, wow. We'll give you the money to go to college. So that, I don't know, it's strange to me to
it was a given.
Expect that.
It was a given, because I have older siblings.
Yeah.
And I knew.
You already knew. Historically, you knew.
By the time my name was up, there was no more money left.
Yeah.
It was the well was dry. Mm-hmm. I'll just put it that way. I need all the loan programs possibly available for me. Mm-hmm. And it all worked out.
Yeah.
Right. I did pay my own way through college. I did. If you remember, we were roommates. I was working damn near full time. Yeah. Circuit City. Damn near I was working. So I took like 16 to 18 credits per semester.
We were all jealous because you had the highest paying job.
I had the highest paying job, but I also worked 39.5 hours a week.
Wow.
And
almost full time.
Almost full time. Half an hour short of full time. Why?
No, they didn't want to pay you benefits, right?
Bingo.
Yeah. But that's how, but again, I'm older than you guys, much older than you guys. So the thing is, like my generation, being the first one to go to college, or the teacher would say to you, hey, make sure you take a job that will be part of what you're studying. It needs to be relevant, right? Don't just make money. But then when my dad passed away, what are my options, right? So I'm waiting tables at Hop Lee from 6 to 6 in the morning. That's when Chinatown restaurants went up. Then I said, wow, I still got to get a job that's relevant to what I'm doing. I'm studying accounting. So I signed up for Federation Stores to be a audit clerk to audit their cash receipts. So I would wake up on a Saturday to get to the department store at around in DeKalb Avenue at around 8 in the morning. I'll work till 4. I get up at 4, and then go home, sleep an hour, and then go to Hopley, and then till 6 in the morning the next day. But again, but there's hope. That's you know that you just have to tough this out. And when you look at your parents, you look at all the people in Chinatown, and you say, "Wow, they have it infinitely worse than me."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, not even close.
Right?
Like
not even close. Right?
My parents had it, like you said, infinitely worse. It's like we can't even compare the two. I mean, there was just imagine trying to leave where you're currently at to another country where you don't speak the language because you think that there's a better opportunity for you to raise a family and for yourself out there.
Right.
And then when you're there, you're a foreigner, you're discriminated against, and jobs are extremely limited because you just don't have the qualifications.
You don't have the skills, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't speak the language.
It's not a choice, right?
And say fuck all that and still make it.
Yeah, and provide for your family too.
Woo! How bad is that? That's bad.
Yeah, they're badass.
That's bad, man.
So, but I
got respect for that. I got a lot of respect for that. Now, I understand that some of the parenting can be fucked up, very toxic, right? Where it was physical. We joke around it, but we get hit with the feather dusters, the plant holding whip thingies, the hangers, the slippers, whatever they can get,
the
belts. Yeah, like we got hit, and I get that. Like for a lot of people, that can be mentally traumatizing.
But it is tougher.
On one end, mentally distraught. On one end, I heard some people thinking about getting another beating stop me from hanging out with the wrong crowd, right? Stop me from not taking school seriously. I don't believe in that. I personally don't subscribe to that philosophy. I think it's outdated. I think there's better ways of encouraging your child's decision making and outcome without physically harming them. But again, you gotta keep in mind, a lot of these people have no college education, and where they come from was way rougher, and they got either beat or neglected. And that almost seems, believe it or not, mild compared to where they came from. Right? When you're talking about being raised in the 50s versus the 80s and 90s and now 2020s, it's big. I mean, you just look at the technological shift, you look at the cultural shift and the parental shift. And I'm not saying to do that for just your parents, but for yourself. Because I know some people well into their 30s and even 40s, and they can't get over it. They're so consumed by this that they don't feel. They're not giving themselves permission to forgive, and they're not giving themselves permission to love as well, and to receive love. Even at this age, they're so guarded and closed because of that. And I'm saying, if you can just forgive them, try to get some closure on that, and move on with your life. And it's easier said than done.
It's a different type of bitterness. Like, our parents' generation, they ate bitter so that we can thrive. And then if that caused harm, in their kids' generation, then they have a different type of bitter, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is also, there was a life lesson that I hear from one of the seniors during the pandemic. I'm going back there. One of the seniors walking out and walking to the center. I said, "Oh, so happy to see you." And I said, he said, "Well, you know how it is, Don. There's going to be Don. Oh, you know how it is, Jujet." He goes, "When I'm home, my eyes are not as good and my hearings are not as good." So I took it literally. I said, "Are you okay? Did you go see a doctor? Did you do anything?" He said, "No, I don't mean it that way." I said, "What did you mean?" He goes, "When you are a senior at home, there's certain thing that happened that I don't like. I just pretend I don't see it. And there's certain thing I hear, I just pretend I don't hear it. And that's why I love coming to this center, because here we're all equal. I can have my conversation. If I hear something I don't like I can give my point of view. If I see something I don't agree with, I will say something, right? So, that gave me the sense like, all these been a tough 25 years, but that's what the meaning is.
Do you
give them
see
that independence?
What type of advice do you usually hear?
I hear forgiveness, right? Like you said, I think they want me to do that. The crazy part is that what's the most painful thing is when a parent, you know, when you lose your child.
Oh yeah, I don't think parents are supposed to outlive their kids.
Right.
Their kids are supposed to bury the parents.
So when you were in a community center for 25 years with 4,000 registered members, there are instances where that happens, and it's you know, the first time that when I heard about, you know, so and so's daughters have cancer, I was freaking out. I said, well, what am I going to do? What do I say? What do I say to them? You know, when I walk in there, what do I say to them? I know them for so many years, and now you have some seniors who are really strong and knows how to deal with you know, life and death. And I think them being together and having those experience, it built a much stronger community that they actually know how to deal with it. And then when the other seniors saw that, you know, this one of their friends just lost the daughter, all the problems seems to just go away. You know, that's why it's like a surgery. It's enough to you know.
Everything else seems small in comparison.
Everything smaller.
Things could be much worse, and they're just from that point on. It seems like they're grateful.
Absolutely, I think you know, I did not start out 25 years ago and say, let's do this. Trust me, that wasn't it, right? It was completely accidental. You know, a Chinese American conservative Republican and an African American, you know, Luther Mook, and an African American, Roland Hill, who is a civil rights activist, African American. And they said, you know, Don, your people are being disrespected in the community. We need to do something. And I'm like, come on, you know, Roland, I can't. He said, listen, if I'm fighting for your people, I think you should too, right? And he kind of shamed me into this. I have to say, you know, it's one of the best 25 years experience that I have, just to see, you know, what life is like.
It sounds like that was a catalyst for you to moving into the world of Asian activism.
I think that Asian activism started very early on when I was in elementary school, right, in the school gym. You know, you got the Ching Chong stuff. You got the, are you Bruce Lee? Do you know Kung Fu part, right? Where finally I did learn Kung Fu, at least say yes to one of those two questions. But in gym, and you know that, you know, all the white kids, Italian kids in Chinatown, and then when we go to junior high school, you know, you have all the black and brown kids, you know, dodgeball, you know, basketball, in gym. You know, you see the fear in the eyes of, not just fear, you see the Chinese kids, especially the immigrant kids, they have just given up. It's like,
damn,
let me stand out there, let the ball hit me, I go to the sideline.
I love
They don't want to be in the game
the
anymore.
Asian kids I went to school with seemed to like for the most part, love gym too. Like that was one of my
Except for
favorite
dodgeball.
classes.
Asian.
I love
Except for dodgeball.
Oh, I love
when
dodgeball.
you are getting, you know, when they see all the kids getting beat up, they just go, you know what, you know. So there's a group of us who said, no, we're gonna represent, right? We're gonna fight back, right? So when we play soccer, you know, we'll know what to do, right? So we know how to get even with that stuff. So I think even at that age, you know, you know that's what's going on. And when I went to Seward Park High School, I remember saying to the principal, I said, you know, why are we, the Chinese kids, not getting the kind of a fair services that we got? You know, because I see all of these kids in Seward Park who never been to Washington, D.C., have no idea outside of Chinatown. So we organized, the student body organized trips to get them out to Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and so forth, right? Because the parent would not trust them during those times with the gangs and everything else, that they go anywhere on their own. But if it's sanctioned by the school, they'll let them go. So,
Right.
so from
Very
necessity, we actually ended up doing that. And then I said to the principal, I said, you know, why do I have to do all this shit, right?
Why
I
am
said,
I doing your
Why
job?
am I doing your job? I said, you know, half the kids. He goes, no, Don, you're wrong. You're not half the population here. It's just that of the 30% of you, 100% of you show up. The other 75%, half of them show up. So you look like you got more people, but you don't. So the budget, so I said, so what are you doing? So you're budgeting, for people who don't show up, or you're going to care for the people who are actually here. So just from school, you feel that, you sense that. There are some teachers who, obviously supporting us and to say, yeah, go ahead, organize it with the local, travel agency to do these bus trips and stuff. So even at an early age, I see this.
When you're talking about communities like Chinatown in New York City, what's going on with the mega jail, when you're talking about what's going on in California with the crimes, do you see that there are a lot of similarities? Yeah,
because I think, like I said, going up from elementary school at PS 130 all the way to Seward to NYU, things were progressively better, right? From getting beat up to being intramural, to all the other good stuff. Getting a job, like you said, able to travel. And then this last 2.5 years, you're going to say, oh, shit, we have regressed. All the worst thing that happened, the bullying at that level, people no longer are concerned about being racist. And it's not just the perpetrators, the people on the sideline, right? Recently we are fighting this, the 4 more homeless shelters in Chinatown. All right, they're going to push.
Mm-hmm. And then when Chinatown already has 6
already have shelters. 6, yeah. Right? And not just homeless shelters. We also have a lot of drug rehab centers, harm reduction centers, jails.
There's already a jail.
Right? There's already 2. You have the federal one, and then that's the city one, and into 2 buildings. So if you add up all of these institutions, and then when we say, hey, you're putting in a homeless shelter that's replacing a viable 4-star rated hotel that's a block away from where Christina Lee was murdered, and you guys think that's okay? And then when we raise issues, we're called NIMBY. When you can hear the comments, people in chat, then you hear people's like, and these are your liberal people from the village, right? Who said, oh, people in Chinatown think they don't want anything. Oh, they want to be, they're isolated, they're insulated, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wow. Nothing
Can you explain NIMBY? What's the acronym for that for those who don't know?
Not in my neighborhood.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard, right? Not in my backyard, right? So NIMBY. So, and I'm like, but it is in our backyard, right? Mm-hmm. We have all this in our backyard. So it's again, what really pains me is when I saw not so much, I expect the city to be irresponsible, right? Have they been responsible, we would not have the crisis that we're experiencing in homelessness, the criminal justice reform, So the politicians have done fail us badly. But what's really painful is the other comments from what we thought were other people looking from these on the sideline. Then you can see, unfiltered, what their thoughts are. That to me,
like the lack of action is what speaks volumes. It's not what they said before the elections. It's their actions afterwards.
It's the actions, but
or lack thereof.
Deeper than that, if you look at the comments, like NBC did a report on NBC News did a report on the protest, and then you see all the comments that people put down on those reports, right? The local newspaper put in a story about that, and it's funny. The local newspaper just put in like Chinatown against the jail or something like that. But I said it's not just Chinatown, Yeah, you're making it a race issue.
It's literally too. It's
literally it's a community fighting for survival, right? So if they just say the Chinatown Little Italy community, I would say, wow, they're looking at it objectively. But when they say Chinatown fighting this stuff, they're looking at it from a race point of view, right? Because now they're not, and even though Little Italy had people who testify at the same public hearing that this report was written about, they conveniently exclude it, right? So is it intentional, or did they just,
it's a more to the point that they don't
even see it? Is it they intentionally don't, did they happen to just not, like things that happen in front of us, we might not see certain things. Right? Is it implicit?
So,
Right.
what are your thoughts of Mayor Adams? Because we had Joe on without holding any punches, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it because he felt like, and a lot of people of Chinatown and New Yorkers in general just feel like they were bamboozled, to use Joe's words.
I don't think so. I think, you got to give him a chance, right? You expect someone to walk in, it's April now, right? Within 4 months to undo all the damages that were done, right? To put that all on one man's shoulder, I don't think it's right. So I believe the mayor has, he's doing what he can, and he gave a lot of clues of what things should be, right? And we need to support. I think we need to look into that and in partnership with it. Now, if he have done certain things that's just like wrong. For example, let me just calling Chinese racist and do away with the SHSAT because we are overrepresented. That to me, it's
That was the previous mayor.
That was the previous mayor, right?
Right.
So shit like that, I will call him out. But give them a chance, right? Give them a chance. And then we as a community also have our own responsibility, right? Just like those kids that I grew up with in elementary school, some of them decide to let me just throw my arm out there, then I'm out on the sideline. There are other who says, Don, let's come together. Let's represent. All right. So we just need to get, all we hear is people saying, oh, let me just get hit and then let me stay on the sideline. I think we need more people to come out and say, let's take this shit on.
I think Joe's big problem with Mayor Adams, why he says bamboozled, was because during his campaign, he promised certain things that would not happen in Chinatown, like the mega jail. And it seems that hasn't been consistent with what's going on currently. And I think that's part of his frustration and the people that's living in Chinatown having to deal with that when they felt that they were voting for the right candidate that were going to protect their interests.
Did they? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the voting number is. Did they all voted for Eric Adams, or he just happened to be the mayor? So I don't know that number, right? But how about keeping accountability in our own community? The mayor said it, and I mean, I agree with you. I think the easiest thing for him to do is like, this is bullshit. Let's just restart this thing over again. But what he said was, our administration will follow the law. The city council introduced this law. We're following that. So why don't we ask our legislature, right? Like Chris Mate. Why don't you introduce some law to say that law is bad? Let's change it. He told you what you need to do. Right? So why are we only calling him a liar?
Who, Mayor Adams?
Right, calling
not Chris Marte?
and not Chris Marte.
Because we had Chris Marte on
the
before.
council,
Right?
The councilman for this district. But we had Chris Marte on before, and he said that he was going to protect the interest of the community here. And he did push back, and he appears, from what I can see on social media and other people that I speak with, that he's against the mega jail. All the actions, he's been physically there protesting against it, speaking out loudly against this.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Well, but that's what any one of us can do, right? I mean, look, we got 10 people arrested trying to stop them from, Chris wasn't one of the people who got arrested, right? Not that I think getting arrested is the solution. My point is, as an elected official, as a city council member, there's a lot more things you can do. You cannot just
do the law.
To the law.
Yeah.
He should be collaborating with, you have a new city council that came on board, right? It's 35 new members, whatever the number is. Why don't you get them together and say, hey, look, this law was written in the previous administration, and we need to change that.
So do you think that this mega jail being built is also on Chris?
I think he can do something about it. He can do a lot more. He can introduce that. If the mayor says, I'm following the law, then he told you, then introduce law that the mayor would have to follow.
So you think that Chris has enough power where he can stop Mayor Adams or whoever's responsible for this mega jail?
He can certainly try. He can certainly say, Mr. Mayor, if you think the law is what you need, I'm going to introduce the law. Why don't you and I work together, Mr. Mayor, and introduce the law to fix this for the community? Like fair share, like making that a stipulation. Like that there's certain element that within that proposal that we can find an alternative to provide for.
Do you think that it'll be taken seriously? I
think first he had to take himself seriously, right? But when he, during his inauguration, said that he had a conversation with the mayor, and the mayor said that the mega jail is not going to happen. He said that, right? And what about Yulie New? What about Brian Kavanaugh? What about Nita Velasquez? What about all these other people who get a slice of this community? Why are we just going after that one person and not, these other people being representing a company for multiple years? Don't you think it's easier to get them to support to represent what the community want?
So why do you think
the new guy?
So why do you think the Chinatown's jail is being built?
The Chinatowns are being built just like the homeless shelters are being built because the city of New York and politicians know that there's nothing that people don't want in their neighborhood. And this is the one community that will not know how to fight back or have the ability to fight back. And sadly, so far, they seem to be right.
So you think that the mayors, the councilmen don't know how to fight back, or are they in cahoots? They're saying that just the people, the community don't know how to fight back?
I think that the community knows how to fight back. The community is fighting back. We're forming, that we will be taking actions, right? We are interviewing lawyers and we will be taking actions. But what I noticed over the year, taking home care communities, for example, in Brooklyn, I have all the support from the local elected officials to support our center. Here we're in Chinatown. Other than people showing up at one or two protests and questions the approach of the selection process, no one's speaking out against the mega jail as is, flat out, right? And no one is introducing legislation to say that's got to stop, all right? They're not even trying.
So you think that they're just doing a dog and pony show? They're putting on what looks nice on social media. They're showing up to the protests, but they're actually not doing anything that's going to stop it when they have the power to.
They definitely have the power to do it, or
even postpone it from happening.
Right, because if he introduces legislation and said, "Hey, let me talk to the city council speaker," and say, "Madam Speaker, this is we need to rethink this situation. This is the harm that's going to cause this community. You cannot, you have to wait." What you gain and what you're going to lose, and then you're gaining. Are you really helping criminal justice reform by building this mega jail? We don't know, but what we do know for sure is that you build this jail, you're going to decimate, this community. So it's not just physically, but the mental. Like we continue, like your question earlier. Do I look back at the changes? It's like our community continue to be beat down, right? Like you don't matter. I don't give a shit, right? And I think we need to fight those fights.
So you think that Mayor Adams and the councilman Chris Marte can do enough, but they're not. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Is it incompetent? Don't know how to do it, or don't want to do it? I really don't know. All I know is that it's not being done. I think the mayor, obviously, from a political point of view, how he's going to go against things that are laid in motion, all right? That I think he would need the support, right, from people to point out to him why it's wrong, and then present another solution, right? For some of the protesters to say, let's keep Rikers open as a solution, that's a non-starter.
Or do you think there's a bigger voice controlling them, saying, hey, go with it?
It probably is, right? I mean, what I hear is that there are plans for Rikers to be a football stadium.
That's news to me. I haven't heard that.
So it sounds like there's money involved.
There's alternative motives in effect here.
So
There's
Rikers
money
Island
to be made.
is they for who? The Jets?
I don't know.
Right now, it's in balance with New York
probably
City,
be
right?
only
They're
the Jets,
yeah.
right?
The Jets and the Giants.
They don't have
the
their own stadium.
Netherlands. They don't have a stadium.
Jersey.
Right.
They couldn't get the Olympics under Bloomberg. So they know they're going to fight all these other places. So Again, I believe I heard that through one of the one of the
On the inside
scoops.
people.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
So follow the money, follow the paper trail.
Right. So, but then again, if we are looking into that, I think, but to try to fight that part, it's not going to happen, right? All this activism, and I always say to people, I don't think our community will ever have the political power because by definition, we are Chinese Americans, right? Asian Americans is 18% of the population, and Chinese is half of that, right? So how are you going to ever get that? So lack of political, political force, is public shame, right? And talk about, are you really solving the problem of criminal justice reform by building a mega jail? And I think that discussion need to be had, right?
So you think it's more of a financial incentive and other type of people, outside forces lobbying to have that for something else so that they can replace the jail and relocate it to a community that wouldn't know how to strike back. That's what it sounds like to me.
But it's not just the money part. Everyone thinks it's money. Of course there's money involved. But if you look at the politicians, right, they need to do something. The election cycle, they got to say, I did something. So the Blas have to say, I'm doing something. So what is that something? I'm putting up a new jail. I'm going to close Rikers. Is it going to work? It doesn't matter. But I got to do. What else is he going to do?
So do they win political points for that overall?
I think so. Yeah. Because they're doing something. They're promising, and they're making a promise of something that will happen. Like, and I think people in Chinatown need to, for me who grew up in Chinatown, I was here like Joe and other people when they put up that new center. It was an empty lot. That
Near Columbus Park, the tombs.
The Manhattan Detention Center they're taking down.
Yep.
Was built from the ground up.
And you were there part of that process.
We were part of that. I was a kid then, and that we saw it there, right? So I think that the question is, we should say to them, our experience have told me, when Mayor Koch checked that box and say, I'm putting a new building because it was solved, it didn't happen. Right now, we're watching the same movie again, right? We're watching the same bullshit being played out, and it's not going to happen. How is it going to be any different? So. And
do you think it's going to be any different this time?
No.
So it's going to happen. This mega jail, whether the community
No.
elects
Is it going to make? I said, your question is the mega jail going to make a difference in criminal justice reform? The answer is no. Is it going to different? I still believe we can stop this.
So it's not going to be history repeating itself?
It all depends on how bad we want it, right? The community.
What would the community have to do in order to stop this?
I think we all show up, right? When 10 people get arrested, if
it should be 100 people.
Should be 100 people.
Yeah.
Should be 1,000 people, right? Like, not for nothing. Hey, Chris, where's your posse, right? When all the people that went to your inauguration who said, when you announced that this, why don't you bring them back, right? Why is it only the 10 people that got arrested and you're on the sideline holding a bullhorn, right? Where is Yuli Nu? Right?
Who's UN for?
Well, she's a state assembly person, right? Okay. And where's Kevin?
And
Brian Kevin?
I think I saw her in one of the pictures. She was kneeling down in front of the bulldozer or whatever.
Yeah, and what can she do? Just for those that may not be aware of everyone that doesn't live in this community.
I think
listening outside of New York.
If you're elected, clearly there are people who you did a successful campaign. I don't want let's make sure we recognize that, right? Mm-hmm. So you get all those votes. Why would you use your pulpit to speak to your constituent and say, this is wrong? For those of you who elected me, I need you to also help fight for my community, to fight for your community.
But Norm just mentioned something. She was on her knees in front of a bulldozer. Do you think that's just for show?
For sure, definitely. Because she can do a lot more than that. Right,
by like a pen to paper. You're saying
if I were to show up, all I can do is, do the same thing that she's doing because I don't have a following, right?
So you're saying that wins political points?
Right?
It's all
Am I gonna say? I mean, I
political
can,
points,
it's
but
a dog
also-
and pony show.
But also
Like-
the power of social media. You can galvanize the public by
What
doing
is the
something
ask?
like that.
Are you showing an image that, I'm standing in front of this stuff, right? Let me do a good image. What is the ask? I'm standing up here. I want everyone who voted for me to come out and stand with me or kneel with me.
The
right?
message wasn't clear. You're
No,
saying.
there was no message. The message is, I'm here too. Right? So they can do a lot more. You don't get elected. You get elected, you can do a lot more than just that. I mean, I'm a nobody, and I can get at least 10, 20 people to show up. You elected, you can't get more people to show up? Seriously?
Yeah, I know some guys down the block that get 10, 20 people to show up.
Right.
Who's to say that she or Chris hasn't brought a few people to show up with them?
I don't see them. Did you?
Norm, did you see them?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I was looking at
Norm's like,
pictures.
I don't want
mean,
no smoke.
I don't
listen,
want
I
no
want
smoke, man.
no
I wasn't
I'm
there
expect-
physically.
I'm expecting a posse to show up, right? I'm expecting to say,
Yeah.
if this is, let me put it this way. If it wasn't for COVID and all this other stuff, I would say to my seniors, right? When we fought for funding, not just for us, but for the fair share for Asian Americans, I have a busload of Chinese, seniors who come out to City Hall from Shipshead Bay and from Bensonhurst. They'll come out, all right? So I would have 50 people who come out. But it's COVID. I'm not going to get them to come out
Don,
and do this stuff.
I want to be clear. It sounds like what you're saying sounds, what some people may look at as cynical. Some people may be like, yeah, that's clear as day. It sounds like you're saying that they're only doing that just for the cameras. And behind the closed doors, they're not doing shit.
I don't think they're doing anything in front or if they're not doing anything in front of the camera, what would you think they were doing behind the camera? Right? I mean, I'm saying, look, you can the power of someone elected is you have people who voted for you. Have anyone received a letter from them to say, hey, this is bullshit. I need you guys all to call City Hall. Here's the number for Mayor Adams. I need you to call, the speaker and let the speaker know that law was not 100% what it's supposed to be. We need these changes. We need to add this to it, right?
Maybe they need better advisors like you, because I've seen some messaging in social media where, okay, we're doing a protest against the jail. We're going to be here and prepare to get arrested. I've seen that stuff, but in terms of actually putting pen to paper, certain legislation, certain laws to be put in place to stop this, I haven't heard anything. So maybe they're just lacking some sort of good advice.
Listen, I'm not that smart to give them advice. I think, they have all these political consultants. They raise all this money. They
should have some.
They should know if they
A
really
team.
want. If they really want to do it, they got elected. If they can get elected, and this is not like, how many people in Chinatown afford a jail? Nobody.
Yeah.
So why don't you?
Not a single person.
Right? Why don't they just organize this stuff? Because
Maybe some or certain organizations that had some back end pay or for the purpose of the jail to be built,
or raise some money, or to say to do something, right? Look, they mobilized a whole bunch of people to protest against Mocha continuously.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there was people protesting against Mocha.
Yeah.
From what? I'm sorry.
Can you just explain what Mocha is?
Mocha's Museum of Chinese in America.
And why was there a protest against?
Because they took the money when the previous mayor de Blasio says, what do you want to make good on this mega jail? One of the things they said that we're looking for, we've been here for so long, we're looking for some money to build so they got $35 million. And because of that, people are saying you sold out the community. People protested. Artists did not withdrawn their engagements or their presentations at the exhibits at the museum, and people protested every weekend, every day. Where are those guys? I mean, why don't we talk to them and perhaps to understand? To mobilize them, to explain to them what we're fighting for. That we too believe in criminal justice reform. We just don't believe that by doing this window dressing, putting up spending $1 billion is going to solve the problem, because it hasn't. I think, at least mobilize those who show up for if they're protesting Mocha because they took money for the jail, why don't you also protest against the jail, period?
Lucky Boys Podcast.